But if at any time we cease such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dried. For we must share if we would keep this gift, all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love.
Good morning, and welcome to this online worship service of Neshoba Unitarian Universalist Church. I am the Reverend Beth Lefever, pleased and privileged to serve as the minister of this congregation, and I am so very glad that you have chosen to join with us this morning. And now our opening words are by Deepak Chopra. Spirituality is meant to take us beyond our tribal identity into a domain of awareness that is more universal. In this spirit, let us come together in worship. And now Jeanne Ortmann will light our chalice.
At this hour, in small towns and big cities, in single rooms and in ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations are also lighting a flaming chalice. As we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideas of love, justice, and truth. Now, if you would please join me in reciting our affirmation of covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
Older Than the Stars by Karen C. Fox. You are older than the dinosaurs, older than the earth, older than the sun and all the planets. You are older than the stars. You are as old as the universe itself. This is the bang when the world began. These are the bits that were born in the bang when the world began. These are the blocks that formed from the bits that were born in the bang when the world began. This is the gas in a giant puff that spun from the blocks that formed from the bits that were born in the bang when the world began. This is the star of red-hot stuff that burst from the gas in a giant puff that spun from the blocks that formed from the bits that were born in the bang when the world began. These are the atoms so strong and tough that formed in the star of red-hot stuff that burst from the gas in a giant puff that spun from the blocks that formed from the bits that were born in the bang when the world began. This is the blast intense enough to hurl the atoms so strong and tough that formed in the star of red-hot stuff that burst from the gas in a giant puff that spun from the blocks that formed from the bits that were born in the bang when the world began. This is the dust so old and new, thrown from the blast intense enough to hurl the atoms so strong and tough that formed in the star of red-hot stuff that burst from the gas in a giant puff that spun from the blocks, that formed from the bits, that were born in the bang when the world began. This is the sun, our daily view, that was born from the dust, so old and new, thrown from the blast, intense enough to hurl the atoms so strong and tough, that formed in the star of red-hot stuff, that burst from the gas in the giant puff, that spun from the blocks, that formed from the bits, that were born in the bang when the world began. This is the planet, green and blue, that circles the sun, our daily view, that was born from the dust, so old and new, thrown from the blast intense enough to hurl the atoms so strong and tough, that formed in the star of red-hot stuff, that burst from the gas in a giant puff, that spun from the blocks, that formed from the bits, that were born in the bang when the world began. These are the plants and animals too, that grew on the planet green and blue, that circles the sun, our daily view, that was born from the dust, so old and new, thrown from the blast intense enough to hurl the atoms so strong and tough, that formed in the star of red-hot stuff, that burst from the gas in a giant puff, that spun from the blocks, that formed from the bits, that were born in the bang when the world began. These are the people, just like you, who live with the plants and animals too, that grew on the planet green and blue, that circles the sun, our daily view, that was born from the dust, so old and new, thrown from the blast intense enough to hurl the atoms so strong and tough, that formed in the star of red-hot stuff, that burst from the gas in a giant puff, that spun from the blocks, that formed from the bits, that were born in the bang when the world began. You are older than the earth, older than the sun and all the planets, older than the stars. You are as old as the universe itself.
Our offering words are by author C. Joybell C. I am never alone, wherever I am. The air itself supplies me with a century of love. When I breathe in, I am breathing in the laughter, tears, victories, passions, thoughts, memories, existence, joys, moments, and the hues of sunlight on many tones of skin. I am breathing in the same air that was exhaled by many before me, the air that bore them life. And so how can I ever say that I am alone? We are never alone. We are part of the whole of it all. Existence, history, every aspect of nature, and every breath ever taken or ever to be taken. We are one with it all, and that is a holy thing. Our morning offering will now be shared. have 3 very brief readings for you this morning. The first by Franciscan friar Richard Rohr. Faith does not need to push the river, because faith is able to trust that there is a river. The river is flowing, and we are in it. My second reading by theoretical physicist Albert Einstein. The important thing is to not stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. One cannot help but be in awe when contemplating the mysteries of eternity, of life, of the marvelous structures of reality. And the third reading by author and theologian Mike Yaconelli. Spirituality is not a formula. It is not a test. It is a relationship. Spirituality is not about competence. It is about intimacy. Spirituality is not about perfection. It is about connection. The way of spiritual life begins where we are now, in the mess of our lives. Trusting that the river is flowing, that we are in it, contemplating the mysteries with curiosity and awe, and doing so right now, even in the messiness of our lives. Is there any more grand and comprehensive explanation or description of spirituality than those of the authors of our 3 readings? Spirituality is not a complicated course of study and practice, though it can be, and rewardingly so, but rather it is here now, all around us. We are in the thick of the spiritual, and in fact cannot separate ourselves from it, though we can deny ourselves the awareness or experience of it by not paying attention, by not observing and paying homage to the magical wonder of it all. It is truly all around us. Just before I started seminary, I was working as an administrative assistant for a mental health agency in Elkhart. The director of the small agency was a United Methodist minister, and we had a complicated work relationship, he and I. Neither of us liked the other very much, but we really liked each other, you know? And we had somewhat compatible senses of humor, or at least I think we did. For instance, when he remarked to me one day about my occasional habit of being late to work, I said to him, "I thought we had an understanding about that." And he laughed really hard. Okay, not. But I enjoyed him some of the time, and I think he enjoyed me. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, he was supporting my journey into ministry, possibly hoping to be rid of me at some point or another. And we talked about it occasionally, my going into ministry, not him getting rid of me. One day we were talking about spirituality, and he said, "It's like pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it." And I thought, someday I'm pretty sure I'm going to use that in a sermon. And so here we are. Now, I don't know what a United Methodist minister knows about pornography, and I, of course, know nothing at all about it, really. But I have an ever-growing grasp on spirituality, at least as I understand it and experience it in my own life. And what I'm growing increasingly aware of is that spirituality really is all around us all the time. Pornography may be too, depending on your definition of it, but that's a sermon for another time. Maybe. Anyway, spirituality is everywhere and always, or maybe rather the way to say it is the opportunity for a spiritual response or experience is ever present. I can, and often do, wax poetic about the glories of nature, the sky and its delights, the great lake roaring up onto the shore, the sound and stable wisdom of the trees, the animals and creepy, crawly things with whom we share the planet, the consonant music of the birds and insects, the rain and breezes, all of it so primitive and rich. Surely, the gifts of nature are ever inviting us to a spiritual experience, small or mighty, and only need to be noticed and relished, to be profound. Many, if not most, or maybe even all of us, embrace nature as a spiritual feeding trough to one degree or another. And that is really good because the feast available is both intricate and grand, steadfast and yet always changing, and we can never get so much as to be too full to take in more. But in what other ways do spiritual opportunities abound? Well, certainly in relationships, in loving, in caring for, in reaching out, in serving, in recognition, in lifting up, in forgiveness. There's a powerful one. In human transactions, large and small, in human touch on all the levels it occurs, in human acknowledgement, that realization in seeing or observing others that we are more alike than different, that we are one. In empathy, in empathizing with the all, the hurting human, the angry human operating out of fear, the tree damaged by wind or lightning, the body of water stopped up by human refuse, the deer taking a tentative step out of the woods, the bird high up singing for a mate, the seedling finally pushing up a stalk of green through the brown earth. Empathizing with the fullness of the human struggle and the struggle of all of life for existence. These are powerful opportunities for spiritual experience. Spirituality exists in laughter, especially, but not only, in shared laughter. Comedian Zoe Deschanel, I was going to look that up, but I didn't. Anyway, she says that humor is part of spirituality, and I think we all know that that is true. Some churches and religious movements have been intentionally incorporating laughter into their theological and spiritual practices. Called holy laughter, it is, of course, controversial, but it is also gaining in popularity. And the popularity should be no surprise, because what is more healing, refreshing, and reinvigorating than a deep, long laugh? Tears can be spiritually enriching also, a few tears of sentiment or the sobbing of grief. Most of us would probably rather be spiritually enriched in other ways, but the point is, all of it can enlarge us spiritually if we gently train ourselves to see it in that way. Music can be a spiritual experience, listening quietly or actively, or creating music. The same is true of art and dance and literature, taking it in or creating it, anything that causes us to slow down and take in the wonder of it all. The late John Bradshaw said, "The spiritual quest is not some added benefit to our life, something you embark on if you have the time and the inclination. We are spiritual beings on an earthly journey. Our spirituality makes up our beingness. Our spirituality makes up our beingness." and being, our own being and the being of all of life, is the well from which we draw our spirituality. It is a deep well from which we can draw, a deep well with much that is profoundly moving, swimming in the depths, and much that is of sheer delight, drifting and splashing on the surface. Let us be intentional about drinking from the well, both in its profundities and its delights. Let us be intentional about seeing, observing, interacting, and empathizing with all that is life, and allowing ourselves to ever more insistently grow in the ways of the Spirit. May it be so, and amen. And now let us move into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, becoming quiet, relaxing in our seats, and breathing deeply and comfortably. We know that the divine, the holy, the sacred, the spiritual is ever and all around us, that it is a spiritual world in which we live and move and have our being. Let us be increasingly aware of the gifts and wonders the world provides us. Let us be increasingly aware of the need for us to take time out to notice and behold the magic everywhere around us, to notice and behold and be grateful. Amen. And until next week, blessed be.
Dark of winter, soft and still, your quiet calm surrounds me. Let my thoughts go where they will, ease my mind profoundly, and then my soul will sing a song, a blessed song of love eternal. Gentle darkness, soft and still, bring your quiet to me. Darkness, soothe my weary eyes, that I may see more clearly. When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress me. And then my soul may hear a voice, a still small voice of love.